It may not have been an imminent threat now, but neither was North Korea before it got a nuclear weapon. If you were to freeze this frame right now, one of two things could happen. One is Iran basically declares victory. The Arab states, though they've been humiliated and humbled by Iran, will lack confidence in the staying power of the United States, and they will crawl back to Tehran. Russia and China will very much accelerate their alliance and arms supplies with Iran. Hezbollah and Hamas will continue to be serious threats along Israel's borders, and the Iranians will remain along the Straits of Hormuz in one state or another. The other scenario is that the 2 weeks now are a tactical move by the president. Bring in new forces, new aircraft carriers, stay the course. And right now, I can't tell you which one, but in the Middle East, if you make threats and you don't break them up, you lose a tremendous amount of credibility.
Hello, welcome back to the Brendan O'Neill Show with me, Brendan O'Neill, and my special guest this week, Michael Oren. Michael, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Brendan.
Great to have you on. There's so much to discuss in relation to Israel, Iran, America. Who better to discuss it with than you? Not only because of your writing on this issue, especially on your brilliant Substack, but also your previous role as Israeli ambassador to the US and lots of other very important things that you've been doing over the decades. So, Michael, I guess I want to kick off with just asking you how you think things are going in Iran in relation to this conflict. It can be so hard for lay people to try and make sense of this war because we're told very different things by different people. So what's your judgment on how things are progressing?
Well, several hours ago, Secretary of War, as he calls himself, not Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, gave a press conference where he said America had won a startling victory, a stunning victory. He detailed all the number of ships that have been, the Iranian ships that have been sunk by the U.S. Navy, the various facilities, nuclear and ballistic facilities have been destroyed, the Iranian leaders who had been eliminated, and said this by any definition is a victory and that the war is basically over. If you go out to the Israeli street, and I would say broadly to the Middle Eastern street, and ask if the war is over and this is a victory for the United States, I think you're getting a different response. There's a different definition of what constitutes victory in the West and what constitutes victory in the Middle East. First of all, in the West, it is certainly a matter of the amount of assets or ships or tanks or even soldiers who are eliminated, which is important. Those of us who are old enough to remember the Vietnam War can remember the body counts. And I think North Vietnam, their reality was very similar to that in the Middle East, where all of those statistics are pretty much irrelevant. What is important is who's left standing at the end of the day and who survives. And if you ask, I think, anybody in Israel whether Hamas won the war in the South, everyone will say that Hamas won the war. If you ask Hamas whether Hamas won the war, they'll say they won the war, even though 80% of the buildings in Gaza were destroyed, tens of thousands of people killed, certainly tens of thousands of terrorists killed. And all they really care about is at the end of the day, someone came out of one of those tunnels and flashed a V sign, and essentially they've won. Iran has emerged from this, I think, more than just flashing a V sign. According to the 10 points on which the President Trump has agreed to negotiate, in essence, Iran will open up the Strait of Hormuz to oil shipments, but it remains in control of the Straits of Hormuz. No limits on the nuclear program, no limits on the ballistic program, no limits on Iranian support for terrorist proxies around the Middle East. And not a word about the 450 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, enough uranium to make 11 nuclear weapons, whether that stockpile will be shipped out to a third country. So there are many issues here. And I think looking around the Middle East today, you're going to have a tremendous amount of anxiety and reservations. Now, with that, the Israeli society is very well attuned to this. I just came from a walk outside. The parks are jam-packed with people. Everyone's out drinking coffee, eating ice cream. They were doing that pretty much during the war too, between missile attacks. But we understand that this may have been a very large round of the many rounds we have fought since our creation in 1948, and we will prepare for the next round. But it has not brought up yet about the fundamental strategic change in our reality that many people had hoped. It was hoped that if Iran was definitively defeated by Middle Eastern definitions, not by Western definitions, that the path would be open to peace between Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Syria, that Iran itself would become a peaceful country. We'd go back to the relations we had before 1979, that the Saudis would join the Abraham Accords. You would have a Pax Americana, a strategic arc extending from the Mediterranean basically to the banks of the Ganges, that would be peaceful and under American hegemony, if you will, American control. Um, and we don't see that happening right now. Maybe premature, maybe it'll happen next time, but right now, no. We live in a harsh reality. The good news, and I was before we just got onto the podcast, I say things are developing as I'm getting onto the podcast. President Trump announced that the Lebanese front would not be included in the ceasefire. This is in contrast to what the Pakistani foreign minister said last night. They said that Lebanon would be included. And this is a crucial, crucial issue for Israel because right now, the northern part of the country, the Galilee, is virtually deserted. The cities there are ghost cities. And people won't come back. They won't come back if Hezbollah is not delivered a decisive blow. And so having a ceasefire now with Hezbollah in place, people simply wouldn't go back to the northern part of the country. So it's close to an existential issue for us. So we shall see. We have to see whether after 2 weeks of negotiation, anything can be accomplished in those negotiations, whether the Trump administration will go back to a military posture in the Middle East, and the war will continue in one form or another. We don't know. We don't know. All we know is what I just told you, which is the Americans have their definition of victories, and people in the Middle East have a different definition of victory.
Yeah, that's a very useful starting point for trying to untangle this and get to the truth of what's happening. Um, would you go so far as to say that at the time that we're speaking, Iran is enjoying a kind of moral victory, if not necessarily a military victory? So one thing that people are saying about the 10-point plan, which you will be aware of, is firstly, people are raising some of the critical points that you've raised, which is that this 10-point plan as it exists doesn't make really any huge demands of Iran. But others are saying that it's a starting point for discussion. America and Israel are going to push back in some way. They're going to fine tune it. They're going to make harsher demands of the Islamic Republic. Do you see that happening? Do you think this ceasefire is the basis for something that might at least restrain the Islamic Republic, even if it doesn't defeat the Islamic Republic?
No. To be put a fine point of it, no. But what has been accomplished, and we can't ignore this, that Iran has been degraded and its leadership levels have been shaved off. Its ballistic missile program has been set back, and it's interesting that the Secretary of War talked about all the launchers and missile arsenals that were destroyed. We were getting missiles last night, a half an hour after the ceasefire. So someone in Tehran didn't get that message. They get the memo that their missile capabilities are destroyed. And even today, Gulf states were being hit by missiles and drones from Iran. So they still have that capability. And we know from Hezbollah, we thought we had seriously degraded Hezbollah during the war of the fall in 2024. And this was not the case. Hezbollah was able to rebuild very, very fast. And that's a model. It shows you how fast Iran can rebuild. But there are a number of wild cards here, Brendan. What's a wild card? For example, a couple of weeks ago, I wrote an article for Fox News where I said that the model for the war against Iran should not be Iraq and Afghanistan. It should rather be the Cold War. That you have an initial phase, which is an intense military phase, but then you move to the next phase, which is a naval blockade, and not a drop of oil gets exported from Iran. You have heavy sanctions on Iran, and the regime sort of dries up on the vine, and it's a long-term policy, and that certainly was very successful during the Cold War in bringing down Soviet communism. Applied to Iran, it could also be very, very effective. So we don't know what the position of the Trump administration or of the world community is going to be as the conflict continues or doesn't continue. Right now, if you were to freeze this frame right now, I would say one of two things could happen. Okay, one is Iran basically declares victory. The Arab states, though they've been humiliated and humbled by Iran, will lack confidence in the staying power of the United States, and they will crawl back to Tehran. There won't be any additional members of the Abraham Accords. Russia and China will very much accelerate their alliance and arms supplies with Iran. They were going to do that before the war, and that will certainly continue. And Hezbollah and Hamas will continue to be serious threats along Israel's borders. And the Iranians will remain along the Straits of Hormuz in one state or another. I don't know if they're going to take tolls for tankers going through, but they're still going to be there. And these are fundamental shifts in the regional and even global balance of power. I question whether there'll be ramifications for Taiwan as well. That's one scenario. The other scenario is that the 2 weeks now are a tactical move by the president to rotate and refresh the American forces in the region, and they are very tired. They've been here for many more months than they should have been, according to their own rotations. Bring in new forces, new aircraft carriers. America has several that are not here. Keep up that pressure on Iran, sanctions, very heavy sanctions, keep up a naval blockade, stay the course. So that's a different outcome, a very different outcome. And right now, I can't tell you which one. Behind door number one or door number two, we don't know. We don't know. And I wish I had a crystal ball when I was more of a prophet. Um, I tend to also look what's happening domestically in the United States with the Republican Party and the midterms coming up and the gas prices and the cost of living. There are many, many variables here, many variables. But I will say this, that the Prime Minister of Israel is not going to be able to get up and do what Hegseth did. He's not going to be able to tell the Israeli people that we won a great victory here. And I hope that when he does get up, we do hear from Benjamin Netanyahu, that he's very realistic, saying, listen, we did the best we could with what we had. And we delivered a very serious blow to our enemies that set them back. And it's not everything we hoped for. There wasn't a regime, wasn't upheaval, a domestic upheaval in Iran. The regime didn't fall. Hezbollah was resurgent. But we are in much better shape than we were on the 6th of October, 2023.
That's a very sober analysis, very helpful analysis as well. Um, One question I had for you is there a scenario where the Islamic regime survives in some fashion, but it's sufficiently constrained to no longer pose a threat to Israel or the broader region? I mean, you talk about the kind of Cold War example there, where it's about keeping people boxed in a sense, in order that they can't pose the global threat they might otherwise pose. Or is the only way to deal with the Islamic Republic to remove the regime, whether that is through sustained war or through such an extraordinary amount of external pressure that it basically falls apart? Can you see a situation where Israel makes peace with a neutered Islamic Republic, or is that not possible?
Oh, not with an Islamic Republic. Let's understand what the Islamic Republic is. It is an Islamicist jihadist republic. On a theological level, it is not very much different from Hamas or ISIS, the Muslim Brotherhood, Al Qaeda. It exists to recreate the medieval caliphate in the Middle East and to extend that border regionally and ultimately globally. That is its raison d'etre. The modus operandi for realizing that vision is through terror, is through war, subversion, and there an Islamic regime that doesn't support terror, that doesn't have a nuclear program, that doesn't make long-range ballistic missiles, is not the same regime. It's not an Islamic regime. Something very different. It's a different animal. So if you ask me whether can we make peace with Iran, definitely. And we're desperate to make peace with the Iranian people, not with this particular government. Listen, we can make peace with the Palestinians, but not with Hamas. We can make peace with Syria, but not with ISIS. We can make peace with Lebanon, but not with Hezbollah. And I mean, look, we made peace with Egypt without the Muslim Brotherhood. So these movements are basically theological movements, and they have no very, very little flexibility, very little wiggle room to make concessions. So it flies in the face of their theology, not their ideology, but their theology, and which are very, very rigid. So that's the answer to your question. It just to be an Islamic regime by the same name, but with very different policies, is not the same country at all.
You mentioned already the domestic scenario in the West, and I did want to, especially in the US, and I did want to ask you about that. Again, it's another issue on which we hear conflictual reports. According to the recent long feature article in the New York Times. There's lots of tension within the White House, within the Trump administration about whether this war was a good idea, whether Israel is dragging us all to hell. I want to come on to that question in a minute as well. Um, but I guess my question is, does America have the stomach to do what you think it might need to do and what lots of Americans think it might need to do as well in terms of facing down the threat that Iran poses regionally and globally? Or, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is this simply a kind of electoral calculation? Will the midterms play an enormous role in making Trump decide, well, it's not worth it, we're going to pull out, we'll declare victory, and that's the end of it? Or is there a broader issue where the American establishment might not have, I guess, the moral staying power for a slightly longer term conflict that might have global benefits if it was seen through properly?
That is actually the central question, what you just asked. I'll take you back now, more than 20 years, 2003, the eve of America's invasion of Iraq. And I was a much younger historian then, and I was asked to testify in front of the Congress about the impending invasion. And it was very difficult for me because I was actually with my professor at the time, who was very in favor of the invasion, and I was against the invasion. And the reason I gave for being against the invasion was precisely that. I said, the British and the French tried their hand at state making in the Middle East. Then they lost their stomach for it. That's just what I said, not using those words. And they left, and they left a mess. And you are going to go into Iraq, and you're going to lose your stomach for state making. You're going to pull out, and the Iranian border is going to move 800 miles toward my country, toward Israel. Now, I talk about not being a prophet. Unfortunately, I was very prophetic there. There's only one thing worse than being a false prophet. It's being an accurate prophet sometimes. And so the question of whether any society has, as you say, the stomach for staying the course is a crucial question. And here, in this case, I can say that a large segment of the American people, apparently, according to the polls, the majority of American people did not have the stomach for it, or did not see a reason why they even should have the stomach for it, which is a failing of the administration. They did not make their case very compelling. I thought that the case for going to war against Iran was, as they say in America, a slam dunk. It was the most clear-cut case I could think of. It was a case where you have a country that has declared war against the United States since the day of its inception, since 1979, a government that has acted on that declaration again and again and again, killing many, many hundreds of Americans, and launching thousands of attacks against Americans. Each one of them, under international law, was an act of war. And here's a country which has lied about its nuclear and military capabilities again and again, and that it may not have been an imminent threat now, but neither was North Korea before it got a nuclear weapon. If you ask Bill Clinton if he could go back and use military force to stop North Korea from getting a bomb, would he do it? And certainly here you have an opportunity to make the world, to Americans, you say, Americans, to make the world safer for your children and your grandchildren. And so there was a slam dunk case for this war, which the administration didn't make very compellingly, I must say. Um, and so the American people did not have the stomach. We had the stomach here. We were actually getting hit by missiles. We're paying more at the gas station, but that was the least of our problems. I have where I'm sitting talking to you now, right next room is my bomb shelter. Running into that bomb shelter as many as 30 times a day with missiles that were large enough not just to take down this building, but to take down the entire neighborhood and kill you in your bomb shelter. And we were willing to stay the course because we realized that this was a once, not just in a generation, maybe a once in an epic opportunity to totally bring about a strategic change in the Middle East. Whether that opportunity has been lost now remains to be seen. Israelis, I can say, are very skeptical. And people in the Middle East are very skeptical right now. Unfortunately, it could change. I'm trying to be as, as cutting as close to the bone as I can on these answers. It is a complex and difficult moment, Brendan. It just is. Ask me about that New York Times article. That was rather extraordinary. The New York Times article, which was based on sources in the administration, basically saying that Israel dragged us into this war, or basically BB convinced Trump and his people that there was a good idea. And this is an argument. This is a line of thought that has bridged the radical right and the radical left in the United States. You had both Tucker Carlson and Tom Friedman in the New York Times saying the same thing. Candace Owen and Bernie Sanders saying the same thing. Israel dragged us into this. I'm glad they have something they can agree on. But what I thought was extraordinary about it was the sourcing, that it came from within the administration. So the administration is actually saying two different things. It's one saying we won this war, we had a tremendous victory. On the other hand, we said it was a bad war that the Israelis dragged us into, and I think that's very problematic for Israel. Certainly problematic for American Jews who are already facing unprecedented levels of anti-Semitism in the United States. And I don't think ultimately it will redound to America's benefit with that, because in the Middle East, and probably not just in the Middle East, leaders and countries respect allies who stick by their allies. Just a thing. I'll never forget being ambassador in Washington and talking to Palestinians, and they were saying how much they didn't like Barack Obama. And I would say, what? This is the most pro-Palestinian president in history. How can you not like Barack Obama? And the Palestinians would say to me, we don't like how he treats Israel. A president who doesn't stick by his allies can't be trusted. And I'll never forget them saying this. I was stunned. But it shows you how people think in this region. You may get credit with your own with American public opinion. You don't get credit. You don't get credit in the Middle East.
Again, it's very useful to know about the, I guess, moral, psychological, political differences between these two parts of the world, which I think people often overlook. I did want to ask you about Trump in particular. I don't know how far you want to push your comments on Trump, but if we look at, I mean, he has been making global headlines over the past 2 days in particular because of his social media posts in which he has said things like, tonight a civilization will die. It's curtains for Iran. You're in trouble unless you compromise. And he swore, he's used expletives as well, which is pretty unpresidential, people would say. What have you made of that kind of bluster, I guess? People took it very much at face value, which is often a mistake with Trump. But what have you made of that kind of talk? And what do you think it might tell us about the administration?
You can have rhetoric like that, expletives and all, if it's backed up with serious threats. So Trump has to grapple with what they call, the taco phenomena, right? That Trump always chickens out on tariffs, on Canada, on Greenland, etc. And I don't know what the strategic ramifications of say not following through in a promise on tweets to invade Greenland, but in the Middle East, if you make threats and you don't break them up, you lose a tremendous amount of credibility. And one of the big debates going on in Israel right now, literally in the last hour, is we've had Israeli politicians come out and said, well, we're going to destroy Hezbollah and we're going to destroy Hamas and we're going to do this and that to Iran. And the reaction among much of the public is, you're losing credibility with us, because we know Israel cannot destroy Hezbollah right now. We know we cannot destroy Hamas or take down the Iranian regime right now. Let's be realistic. Let's say what we can do. So I think there's a price to be paid for it. And there was a lot of discussion last night. I don't know when this podcast is going up, but last night, a few hours before the deadline expired. Remember, it was supposed to expire at 3:00 in the morning our time. The bets were running that Trump was going to back down, that he was going to accept the ceasefire. So it didn't come as a huge surprise to people. I want you to know. And so the president has, unfortunately, that reputation in this region as someone who makes that threat and that back down. Now, it could be a bluff. What can I say? He has done it before. He has done it before, and he has used that type of language before and then acted on it, sometimes very forcefully. We don't know. And it's always, as someone who's a historian or an analyst, the three hardest words for me to say, you should know, is I don't know. Because and I have to say them over and over again. It ain't easy. I don't know.
Yeah, no one likes to say those words, but I feel that all of us are saying them more regularly these days. Michael, before I let you go, I want to ask you just a little bit about, again, about the home front, the West, not your home front, but my home front. What's happening in the West? You've already touched on the Tucker Carlson situation, that the right and the left uniting around, as you put it on your Substack, a new war has revived a hateful old lie, which is this idea that the Jews are dragging America and the West into these hellish conflicts. We've seen a lot of that over the past 2.5 years. Here in the UK, for example, last night there was a gathering outside Downing Street, a pretty large gathering of people waving the flag of the Islamic Republic, chanting Allahu Akbar. I made the point that I found that sight far scarier than Donald Trump's tweets, although everyone is obsessing over Donald Trump rather than over the fact that there are people in the UK who want the Islamic Republic to win. This hostility to Israel that exists in amongst the intellectual classes in the West is something that worries me enormously. What do people in Israel think of that? Do they just think they're a bunch of losers, or do they think it's a serious problem? How do they see it?
I can't speak for Israelis. Let me speak for myself, if I will. Long-standing understanding I've had that the West's inability to defend Israel, to stand with Israel, is a symptom and not the cause, a symptom of the West's refusal to defend itself. And that's what we've seen now. We've had European leaders come out and say, "Well, we understand that Iran is the world's largest state sponsor of terror. We understand that Iran kills its own people, that it threatens other countries, but we're not going to do anything about it." All right, but somehow doing something about it is illegal. And we've seen, Trump did not treat his allies very nicely, but the refusal of countries like Spain to let the United States use their airspace. I would not be surprised if Trump, if he doesn't pull out of NATO, he's going to greatly degrade America's position and reduce America's position in NATO. And so the big question here is not so much is anti-Semitism, and it's huge. And my friends in the UK tell me that it's blown out. It's reached levels that no one could ever imagine, and it's true elsewhere too. Is can we still talk about a West, Brendan? Can we still talk about a place called the West that is willing to unite and defend itself? Now we like to think in Israel that we defend not only ourselves but we defend the West. Right now we have something in the order of 400,000 reservists called up. Go out, they leave their families, leave their jobs, go out to fight for their country. 400,000 Israelis proportionately is the equivalent of about 24 million Americans. That's 8 million Americans more than fought in all of World War II. And you say to yourself, okay, who in the West, what countries are willing to actually go out and defend themselves? Is someone willing to pick up a gun and fight and die for Belgium today? What does that mean? And so the questions here run very deep. What is the West? Is the West willing to defend itself? Is the West willing to defend itself against radical Islam? I had some friends over from Spain last night talking about the Spanish policy of immigration. Basically, you can come from anywhere and get citizenship very, very quickly. Is it willing to stand up and defend its culture, defend your past? Do you recognize your past? I'm going to go on and on about this, but a couple of years ago there was a decision, a vote taken in the EU whether to consider Christianity one of the sources of European identity, and the EU voted it down. So you had 1,500 years of Christendom thrown out the window. But believe me, the enemies of the West aren't doing that, and they are willing to fight, and they know what they're about. And so these are deeper questions, which I think we all have to ask ourselves, not just in Israel.
Yeah, I was in Israel at the end of last year, and the thing that struck me was just the willingness of young Israeli people to take pride in their country and to stand up for their country. Obviously, they need to serve in the IDF, but it was incredibly inspiring, not least because polls in the United Kingdom continually find that 18 to 24-year-olds are incredibly unlikely to want to fight for this country, even if we were invaded. I mean, that number
Mhm.
who are willing to fight just goes down all the time.
In America
Um,
too. America
yeah,
too. Less than 1% of the United States American population serves in the military.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
really scary, and it's happening across Europe. Michael, this brings me on to my final question for you,
Sure.
which is, I guess, can Israel go it alone? You've already touched on this in relation to what Israel can't do on its own. It can't take out the Islamic Republic right now at this moment. It still has a lot of American support. But you know better than most that a lot of the West is turning against Israel. there is this scourge of anti-Zionism, which I find an incredibly worrying ideology, which is very pronounced in Europe in particular. Um, is there a situation where it can be Israel against the world? I mean, obviously, you don't want that to be the situation, but is it possible that Israel can look after itself, or must we try to mend these bonds between Western nations and Israel?
Well, I think the answer to both questions is yes. It's not and or. We should try our best to mend the relationships, and situations politically may change in Europe, in Great Britain certainly. And but at the same time, a day before this war broke out, we had a visit here from the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, who just happens to represent the largest country on earth and the most economically probably dynamic country on earth, who came here knowing that a war was about to break out and talked about his love for Israel and commitment for Israel. And so what we have to do is diversify our foreign policy portfolio. We have to, we've been, in the West, they talk about pivoting to Asia. We have to pivot to Asia. Diversify it, be less dependent. I think last week, the Israeli government announced that it was no longer going to do any military business with France. I think that's a very good decision. Not that they provide so much, but and if a country is willing to use that type of blackmail during a war, okay, yep, it's this decision. We just shouldn't have a relationship in that way. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to work, to improve our relationship with France or with Great Britain or with Belgium or even Spain, which is much harder. But we can't rely on it in the future. And I could take this to a deeper place is that for the last something like 2,000 years recently, the Jewish people have been trying to ingratiate ourselves to the West, to Western civilization, and we keep on getting put off, and not just put off, but massacred and expelled and gassed. And maybe at some point, maybe we should start internalizing the message. And I'll leave you with that thought. Maybe we should get the memo. Someone's trying to tell us something.
Michael, thank you very much.